Hey everyone, I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and I'm going to go over the Dorian Finney-Smith trade for D'Angelo Russell. Seemed like he was heading to the Grizzlies. That was all the reporting yesterday. Sounded like they were pretty close, but ultimately we woke up this morning and he is Laker bound. So I'm going to go over the trade from a cap perspective for both teams and also go over what I think might be next for the Lakers, what they have left to offer, what else they can do to get some of the other targets they're looking for. So I'm going to get into it. Please subscribe if you haven't already and check out the links below for all the other things that you could follow me on. So the Lakers are now 18-13 after beating the Kings last night, which is only 2 games below the 2 seed. So a lot of good possibilities for where they might end up on the playoff bracket. And the plan was for the Lakers to get through these first 30 games before making any decisions on how they want to proceed in the trade deadline. And they feel like the team is good enough. They're going to build upon it. And this is their best start since the 2020-21 season. This is a better start by 1 game from last season and a much better start than when they had 2 years ago in the year that they made the Western Conference Finals. So a couple things to know about the Lakers and their payroll and the limitations they have towards making trades because of it. So they're operating over the first apron, almost $11 million above it, and they are just below the second apron, about $30,000 below it. So they aren't hard capped to the second apron, they just don't want to exceed it. They could do that with a minimum signing. But regardless, because they're over the first apron, they cannot increase payroll in the trade. So whatever they do, they have to decrease payroll in any trade they make. So I went ahead and plugged in the trade. I put in Dorian Finney-Smith and Shake Milton in for D'Angelo Russell and Maxwell Lewis. So one thing to note is that while they traded both Russell and Lewis together, that was an aggregation. The way that this trade is structured is they're trading Russell, who makes $18 million, for Finney-Smith and Shake Milton, so they're able to fit both those players under Russell's salary, and then because of that, they're trading Lewis by himself. So they create 2 very small trade exceptions. I doubt they even get used. And they get a lot of savings. They save about $12 million against the tax and get a total of $15 million in savings with their payroll tax combination. And they also get a little more breathing room below the second apron. They're now $3.5 million below the second apron. So if the Lakers don't do anything else, they now have a little bit more flexibility for the buyout market. If someone becomes available, they have this full 15-man roster. If someone wants to join them, now they could comfortably cut someone and sign a replacement while not crossing the second apron later. So what is next for the Lakers? This is a report from Jovan Buha on The Athletic. He put this out, I think, a couple weeks ago. So the Lakers got their 3 in the wing, and they're looking for a couple other things. They want a defensive-minded center, so probably one that can protect the rim, and then a big guard who can be a point-of-attack defender. So to me, kind of sounds like the Lakers are trying to go about this trade deadline similar to what the Mavs did last year, where they trade a first-round pick here, get a guy like PJ Washington, trade a pick swap there, bring in a guy like Daniel Gafford, just get a couple guys that might be overlooked by the league, and if they all fit in well, maybe you can make a deep run, just like the Mavs did last year. So if we take a look at the draft picks the Lakers have left to trade, they gave up 3 to get Dorian Finney-Smith, so they've got 2 left. Both of them are in the 2025 draft. They can trade a maximum of 2 first-round picks in 2029 and 2031, and they can also trade multiple pick swaps. So something that they could do to maximize the amount of picks they trade is just trade those to keep those 29 and 31 picks available for trade. They could trade pick swaps in the even years, so like 26, 28, and 2030. So if they do trade pick swaps, probably in those even numbered years. Now, I'm going to just get this out of the way. If you are hoping that the Lakers can still trade for a Jimmy Butler or Zach LaVine, I don't think it's going to happen anymore. I don't think it ever was going to happen. I don't think the Lakers were looking to make that type of move. And now it's going to be even harder if they even wanted to, because they got off of D'Angelo Russell's $18 million. That would have helped. And now they got to do like a 4-for-1 or 5-for-1. It's just not going to happen at this point. So I think they should be able to get a big. There are plenty of them available, and there's so many at different price ranges. I think there's enough possibilities for the Lakers to get something done there. I am a little more concerned about getting the guard type of player they're looking for. The elite ones are not available, and they're all locked up. Guys like Alex Caruso, Jalen Suggs, they would require first round picks anyways. And I highly doubt some of the other cheaper, more promising ones, young guys like Kason Wallace or Keon Ellis, are even available. So then I start to look at, okay, not like elite, but pretty good point of attack defenders. There's guys like Chris Dunn on the Clippers, Jose Alvarado on the Pelicans, Nickeil Alexander-Walker with the Wolves, but I'm not sure how attainable those guys are and what it would take for their respective teams to move off them. Then there's some guys that are a little more expensive. There's like Marcus Smart, Bruce Brown, very popular Lakers target, but both players make too much money now. Smart is also injured, has fallen off a bit. So then I go even lower in the spectrum. Again, not like great defenders by any means, but maybe more realistic guys they can get. Guys like Ayu Dosunmu, maybe Cody Martin or Gary Harris. All of them make about $7 million each. So very attainable salary-wise. They can get there by moving off of ideally Gabe Vincent or Jared Vanderbilt, save a little bit of money there too. I don't think those guys are worth first round picks, so maybe they can get a guy like that with a swap or some second round picks instead. And then just some overall thoughts on the trade. I do want to acknowledge that the Lakers have been more or less married with the same exact roster since the summer of 2023, other than getting in Dalton Connect and Bronny for Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince heading out. So after a year and a half, more or less, of being dormant, they're finally being active. And I think that given their current outgoing pick obligations, they have one going to Atlanta this year and another one to Utah in 2027, they've been, I think, right not to further double down on their obligations and further deepen their asset deficit. So doesn't quite justify whatever some of the mistakes they made in the past. The biggest ones are getting so many expensive role players. But overall, I think it's been right. They've been right to be more conservative with their picks over the past few years and be reactionary. I think overall the value they gave up to get Dorian Finney-Smith is pretty reasonable. Essentially 4 second-round picks worth the value if you consider Maxwell Lewis a second-round pick worth the value. And that's pretty good for a really good, versatile defensive wing who's shooting 46% from three. I'm sure that's going to drop down. I doubt he holds up that level for the rest of his career. But overall, pretty significant addition to their top lineup. And now I'm looking at the roster, and they've got a lot of wing options now. It kind of takes me back to the fact that we're now 3.5 years from when they acquired Russell Westbrook, and they just had no wing depth after doing that. And now I see they got 2 bigger wings like Dorian Finney-Smith and Rui Hachimura, and they've got 2 good smaller wing options in Max Christie and Dalton Connect, and you got Austin Reeves playing the point guard. So Lakers finally bringing back a lot of the size that they've had let gone through since their 2020 championship year. Now, I'm not comparing the level of depth they have at the wing to what they had in 2020. I'm just saying they've got arguably their best quantity of options of wings since then. And at the same time, though, I'm a little curious if bringing in Dorian Finney-Smith will make Rui expendable, but I would probably keep him just to keep that level of depth. Unless you can get a significant wing upgrade for him. I wouldn't trade him for a big or the type of guard they're looking for. Ideally, try to do that with other players. And as for the Brooklyn Nets, let's just get to the point. They have now 16 second-round picks to go along with the 15 that they've had over the next 7 drafts. Coming into the trade, they didn't have the same limitations in making a trade as the Lakers did. However, they were just $3.5 million below the luxury tax line heading into it. So the biggest thing is they wanted to keep the money relatively equal or just marginally increase their payroll. So I plugged in the trade. They take on a little bit more salary than before, and they are left just $677,000 below the luxury luxury tax threshold. Now, one other thing to note is that between Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson, and D'Angelo Russell, they've all got unlikely bonuses. But out of all of them, the only one that's on track to get any of them is Cam Johnson. So he's having a really good year. If he continues averaging at least 15 points per game, which he's at 19 now, and 60% true shooting, which he's at, I think, 65 right now, he gets an additional $562,000, but that's fine because that would leave him about $114,000 below the luxury tax line. So if the Nets do nothing else and he hits that incentive, they will still deduct the tax without having to make any additional cut. And with Cameron Johnson in mind, he does seemingly look like the next player up to potentially get traded by the Nets. So like I mentioned, he's having a great year. He's on a very good contract, about 2 years, $42 million left beyond the season. It's very team friendly and makes him very attainable for most teams in the league. I mentioned him as a potential target for the Kings in my Kings video that I released a couple days ago. And the thing that I mentioned in there is that if I'm the Nets, I'm thinking that they're seeking multiple first-round picks as a starting point just because the nature of his contract. I think that they're in a fine position to keep him if their asking price is not met, because I just don't think they're in danger of ruining the tank by keeping him at this point. And with D'Angelo Russell heading back to the Nets, I've already seen some speculation about him potentially getting bought out, which makes sense usually when a role player goes to a bad team, but I don't see this happening for him. I just don't know if there are really better options out there. His trajectory is plummeting right now, and he can't even join every single team. There are teams that are over the first apron he wouldn't be able to join because his salary is over the mid-level exception. Teams like the Suns, Celtics, Bucks, Nuggets, Heat, just to name a few. So his best bet might be to just play out the year with the Nets. He's going to have the keys to the offense, and that might be his best opportunity to boost up his stock again. And he also still has his bird rights if he finishes the year as a free agent. So that could be a value, but I also wouldn't expect any like huge sign and trade opportunities for him that could make him more money, just because the Nets already have so much cap space. They don't really need to do any. And speaking of the Nets cap space, I've got an updated projection for them. So if I've got some first round pick projections, they've got their own, they've got three, as well. So they're going to have 4 first-round picks so far in this draft, and they can get up to about $66 million in cap space. That factors in them being able to re-sign Cam Thomas, so they would keep that $12.1 million restricted cap hold. They get to spend $66 million and then re-sign him. But I think more realistically, they might be looking at something around $50 million if they don't do anything else, just because they do have Zaire Williams, they do have Day'Ron Sharpe for now, and if they keep those players and they make it to free agency, I would figure that the Nets might want to keep them. So if they do end up re-signing them, they might be working closer to $50 million in cap space. Overall, I think 3 second-round picks is fine for Dorian Finney-Smith. It's about what I expected them to get for him anyways. It's also in line with what they got for Royce O'Neal last year. Would have been nicer if they were able to get a first-round pick, and now I think we kind of have an explanation why that didn't happen, because the first-round pick Memphis was offering was top 15 protected in this year's draft. This is according to Michael Scotto. And the issue with that is that they already have 3 other first-round picks that are projected to be in the 20s. I don't think it makes too much sense to add a 4th one. If they were able to get a 2026 first-rounder, which was rumored, that would have made a lot more sense, especially since the Nets only have their own first-round pick in that draft. So that's everything I've got. I'm sure we'll hear more about both these teams as we get closer to February 6th. So that's all. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please check out the links below to all the other platforms I am on.